Good morning, all.
Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning.
Morning, Jamie.
Morning, Chris. David. Jay, we all set to start?
You're good to go.
We are good to go. Recording. Clerk Basin live streaming.
All set.
All right. Like to call the meeting of the Technical Review Committee to order Wednesday, February 10th at 9 a.m. Just do a quick roll. Joe Murphy. Jamie Gorman.
Here.
Rich Bourbonnais.
Here.
Chris Henner.
Yeah.
David Flanders.
Here.
And we have staff today, Brian Wagner, Jay Parker, and
Here.
Jamie Rabbit chairing the meeting. Okay, we don't have John Schock yet.
Jamie, I had some problems with my audio, but hopefully you hear me now.
I can hear you, Joe.
Thank you.
Rich, do you know if John's coming?
He's supposed to. I text him to see where he's at, but we'll get him.
All right. Agenda item B is approval of minutes, December 9th and January 13th of 2021. Anyone have any question on the minutes, or do I have a motion to approve?
I had a comment, Jamie, on the minutes for January 13th. At the bottom of the first page where we're talking about Blackbeard Site 21, it says, Mr. Gorman stated, based on the proposed plans, the proposed structure as well as surrounding structures within 5 feet will need to have sides rated 1 hour fire rating. But the second thing was, I thought he also mentioned something about a covered or enclosed porch wasn't allowed. Am I remembering that correctly? Because it wasn't mentioned here in the minutes. That's the only reason I say.
No, so enclosure of porches would be only allowed by special use permit by the zoning board, but not prohibited.
Okay. Okay. Then I'm all set.
Okay. Is that a motion, Mr. Flanders?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Hey, Jamie, I had a couple comments. This is,
Okay.
we're talking about the January minutes.
Withdrawing your motion for the moment?
We're talking about the January minutes, correct?
Yeah, David, do you mind withdrawing your motion for a moment?
I'll withdraw the motion.
Thank you.
So my comment is on the Paul Massey on the last page, items to be addressed. I just asked that it be a little more specific. Closed southern entrance with curbing and sidewalks similar to the balance of the sidewalks. I didn't want them just to put cones along there. It's got to be replaced with sidewalks and granite curbing. And the fire access number 3 along Schaefer Street. I don't know if you wanted to be more specific and say fire access by foot. So the planning board or others don't misconstrue that they're not looking for another driveway entrance.
Correct.
So just 2 suggested edits on those.
I would go ahead and move that we accept the minutes with those 2 amendments.
And I'll second.
Do I hear any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And any abstentions? Joe, you're abstaining?
Yeah, because I wasn't at the last meeting.
Yep. All right, thank you. Agenda item C, TRC minor review, Coastal Community Overlay District, Blackbeard site number 21. This is a request to demolish an existing single-story cottage and replace with a new 18 by 32 single-story cottage located at 836 Matuna Beach Road, AP 92-2, Lot 54, Jesse and Pierre Courier. Jay, do we have them on today?
Just
Yep.
brought them in.
I see them now. Thank you. So Jesse and Pierre, it's you have them.
Sorry, we were having audio trouble. I think it's working now.
Yes,
Did you want us to go over what we're proposing?
go ahead, Jesse.
All right, so we're gonna, as we talked about last time, demolish the current structure to build an 18 by 30 foot stick-built dwelling. Based on our previous discussions, we've made some changes. We submitted the new plan that has a fire-rated wall on the side facing the Woodburys, removed windows from that wall, added snow clips, and the Blackbeard's board did approve for us to move an additional foot from the Corvilles. That would allow for the 5-foot fire separation.
Thank you for that update. Jamie, do you want to start us off if you have any comments or?
Yeah, thank you. So I spoke with the Couriers over the last few weeks as well as this morning regarding this. The issue at hand is if the Woodburys, which is on the west side of their proposed cottage, is classified as a recreational vehicle park model, that needs to be determined to be exempt from rating of the Woodbury wall. If it is classified as a recreational vehicle, then there would be no rating required. So that needs to be confirmed before they would be able to locate it 2 foot 8 inches from the Woodburys.
And we find it very troublesome that we're relying on our neighbor who's been fighting us every step of the way for this project to provide that information. I mean, we know that his RV was delivered on a trailer frame with wheels, it's removable.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of troublesome is like this park model has been installed in 2017, so fairly recently. And it was allowed to be so close to us and not have the fire rating wall or actually have a bunch of windows on this side because the city considered it as a park model in 2017. So I think the city should still consider it a park model in 2021.
So I'm going to be, and I let the Couriers know that I'll be reaching out to Mr. Woodbury as well as Blackbeard's requesting that information.
Jamie Gorman, there was a potential solution, and that was to move it 5 feet away, correct? And then the fire rating wasn't necessary?
Correct. I think there were issues associated with the Blackbeards Association and approvals. Maybe the Couriers could speak on that.
Yeah, I know it was discussed. There were a lot of issues with moving over with like sewage and water and different things. And I know it's a potential option, but I just don't feel like we should have to move. You know, this distance was established and then Mr. Woodbury reestablished it in 2016. And at that point, if he was concerned about fire safety, he could have moved over himself.
Just, again, just for clarity, Mr. Gorman's responsibilities are to maintain the existing building code and that fire safety separation. You may not have any discretion with that minimum distance. So again, there's potentially a way out, and that's if that's a recreational vehicle and it's that classification. If it doesn't fall within that classification, I think the discussion goes back to the site has to be 5 feet away, whether you feel it's fair or indifferent.
I understand that part. I just think it's very convenient that our neighbor is going to be the one that has to supply us this information to prove that it's an RV when we know he's not going to be forthcoming. And I mean, we'll see where it goes, but.
And also I feel like the city, it's an information the city already have, because in 2016 or 17, the city approved his site plan and approved his installation and gave him a building permit because it was a park model. Otherwise, in 2017, it couldn't have been approved.
Do any of the other members have any questions or concerns?
I just wonder what the process is for determining whether this is a recreational vehicle or not. I mean, it seems it's pretty well, it may have come on wheels, but it seems to be a pretty cumbersome recreational vehicle, not something you would take out to a campsite on a weekend. But what is the process for determining that?
So basically, it would have to meet under Rhode Island general law, the park model RV standard requirements, which is that it's essentially 4 items would have to be checked off. It would have to be under 400 square feet in area, transportable by a vehicle or drive itself. It have to be, it can't be used as a dwelling unit permanently, seasonal only, and for recreational use, and on a chassis. So it could be elevated and installed on foundations, but it would still have to be on a permanent chassis. The thing is, for it to be under state law, considered a park model RV, it has to comply and be certified with ANSI A119.5. So that's something the manufacturer would provide. So really that's where it's at, is determining if it's meeting that classification.
Okay, thank you.
And also, I wanted to mention that in 2016, in the zoning board minute, the zoning board approved a trailer, not a dwelling. So if Ms. Woodbury didn't put a dwelling, then it would be against what was approved. Am I correct to say this? Like, is that the right interpretation, that Woodbury was only approved for a trailer and not a dwelling?
Just for clarification, under Jamie Gorman's explanation, it doesn't matter what the zoning board called it, whether they called it a recreational vehicle or a trailer. From a building code perspective, Mr. Gorman needs to make a determination, or you need to provide evidence that it is not, in essence, classified as a trailer. It's classified as a recreational vehicle. Jamie, correct me, but if it was a trailer, it would be a 5-foot separating distance. It's only less than 5 feet if it's considered that recreational vehicle classification.
Yeah, so I know at the meetings and the terms kind of get thrown around: park model, trailer, manufactured home. So it would, they may have said one thing, but in reality, I mean, none of them are permanent dwelling units. They're recreational, seasonal, but it has to fit the definition of park model recreational vehicle, in this case, to be located under the 5 feet.
Now, I think potentially the dilemma the TRC is faced with, and you could take it in the form of a motion that if the committee was to pass this along, I think there are two provisions that the trailer may be located at the dimension shown on the existing site plan, so long as it can be determined that it meets the building code with regards to separating distances. If that information can't be provided, the second option would be is that can be relocated with a separating distance of no less than 5 feet to the east. And I potentially say that because if the committee approved it in just this manner without the ability of it to slide to the east, technically the property owner with their proposal would have to come back to TRC if you just approved the 2 feet 8 inches and then it became something subsequent. How committee members feel about that? Jamie, would you be comfortable with that?
I would be comfortable with that, making an approval conditional that it's determined it's compliant with the building code.
John, Rich?
I agree with that, but I just had one question with the snow guards. I see on sheet number A3.1.2, all it says is manufacturer's recommendation with snow guards. It's not, there's no drawing, that's not very descriptive. Jamie, are you okay with that?
Yeah, so I mean, the snow guards, that's a recommendation. I mean, building code wise, it's not something that I could require them. And that's what I believe our conversation with the couriers was, that it would be recommended, but not required. So
I guess to confirm, is the applicant agreeing to install the snow guards?
Yeah, we don't mind installing snow guards.
Okay, thank you.
I would be comfortable if the members felt that was something that is more of a necessity versus a request. And since the applicant has stated they would have no issues installing those, that be included in the motion, in essence stating 3 items: that the seasonal structure can be built as shown on the plans, so long as they can meet the building code as it relates to separating distances to the building, to the structure to the left. If that cannot be accommodated, the structure can be relocated to the right or east to meet those separating distances. And third, that the installation of the roof shall include snow guards.
So move.
I'll second.
There any discussion?
Jamie, we do have a hand raised in the audience.
All right, could we withdraw that motion, John and David, in the second?
Yes, withdrawn.
Okay, Mr. Woodbury, if you can unmute yourself.
Good morning. I've done a little research on my unit. It does not fall into the current recreational vehicle guidelines. It was
Mr. Woodbury,
manufactured in 2016 under the HUD manufactured home construction safety standards. The current recreational vehicle, it was changed in 2018 to require some park models to be considered recreational vehicles. So it does not fit that standard. For one, it was built prior to the commencement of the current law, and 2, it's not permanently towable by a light duty truck, which is required under the standard. It's 19,000 pounds, stick-built construction when it showed up. Required a tractor trailer horse to tow it to the site, and special permitting as it's an oversized load. So it is a park model trailer, it's not an RV. I was in contact with the manufacturer of it. It's non-rated. They don't rate park model trailers. So it does not have a 1-hour fire rating on that wall. It was manufactured in accordance with the HUD home manufacturing guidelines. So it should be considered, a trailer, a manufactured trailer, wood construction. So the 5-foot fire separation should apply here. For me to move, it's impossible. There's no place to go.
It's not impossible to move.
It would render my access inaccessible. As it is, I have limited space now to the east or to my left. It's not up to me to move, to provide a ways and means for the couriers to meet the current codes. They're making the proposal to build a new building. It's their responsibility to meet the current standards. I provided Mr. Gorman with a copy of the Federal Register that changes the criteria for HUD constructed park model trailers to ANSI standards, which took effect in January 15th of 2019. Just please implement the code where it's provide the necessary safety standards here.
Hey, Jamie?
Yep, Mr. Murphy, Joe, you had a question?
I would make the recommendation that we go with the motion as stated, given the opportunity for Mr. Woodbury and the applicants to present whatever evidence they have to Mr. Gorman, and then giving Mr. Gorman time to decide the best way to meet that condition.
That seems reasonable. Thank you, Mr. Woodbridge, for your comments and input. And again, Mr. Woodbridge, you provided that information to Jamie Gorman?
Yes, I have.
And you'll continue to have a dialogue with Jamie Gorman?
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're back to those 3 items. There was originally a motion by John Schock, seconded by Dave Flanders, that those motions were withdrawn. Do we have a motion on those 3 items?
John? I'll make the motion.
I'll move again with this earlier motion that I had.
And I will second again.
Thank you. Do you have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor? We'll go by roll. Joe Murphy,
Aye.
Jamie Gorman,
Aye.
Rich Bourbonnais,
Aye.
John Schock,
Aye.
and David Flanders.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. And again, I'm sure the couriers will continue to have correspondence with Jamie Gorman.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, our next agenda item under C2 is minor subdivision, no street creation, and Jelly minor subdivision. Just bear with me. That's my screen. Request for a 2-lot subdivision with no street connection located at 183 Kensington Court North, AP 39-2, Lot 14, Richard and Patricia Angeli, applicant owner. Jay, are they present?
Yes, Mr.
Rick Angeli's here. How are you?
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
So if you would like
Jamie,
to,
Josh Rosen, also here for the applicant. I'll just briefly describe the plan, if I may, and then if you have any questions or questions for Rick as the owner of the property, we'll go through that process at the time. Rick and Patricia currently own what's designated as Assessors Plat 39-2 Lot 14, as you see on the map. As it exists today, it is a 1.88 acre parcel, number 183, Kensington Court North. So for those of you not familiar, Kensington Court North is a private road that comes off of Chestnut Hill Road, the northern entrance of Chestnut Hill Road to Teft Hill. So his property, or Richard and Patricia's property, has that frontage both on Kensington Court North, and the property currently goes all the way down to the east to South Road. So there's 1.88 acres total, and the proposal is simply to divide the lot into two, keeping the house, its utilities, and everything else that's built on the current property separate from a new vacant lot that will have approximately 1 acre, just under 1 acre, meeting the 40,000 square foot requirement in the R40 zone that will front on South Road. We've done soil evaluations on the property, had those approved by Rhode Island DEM to confirm that a septic system could go on the vacant lot. We also received a letter from Kingston Water indicating that water is available along South Road for this future property to tie into. And we've obviously presented the subdivision plan meeting all of the other zoning requirements in the R40 zone to establish the second lot. At this time, there are no plans for the owner to build or develop the property as it would be created, that second lot. Obviously, that would be subject to something that happens in the future, perhaps, but the lot would be considered a buildable lot, and the existing lot that remains has no issues as far as dimensional requirements or non-conformance with the zoning. So 2 lots completely conforming to the zoning ordinance for the R40. That's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple subdivision. No new street creation, existing frontage.
Josh, what would be the, David Flanders here, what would be the access to the lot?
From South Road.
Okay.
We understand that going forward, as everybody else understands, I'm sure, and is aware, that any development on that lot has to go through the process of one, OWTS permit with Rhode Island DEM, 2, a soil erosion and sediment control plan with the town, and within that process, obviously, any road opening permit or utility permit and or driveway PAP required by the town. That's all something that the owner is well aware that in the future, those particular processes would have to be embarked on.
Mr. Rosen, have you evaluated the viability of the access, sightline, drainage grading?
Yeah, you have 134 feet of frontage along South Road, which, is accessible. There are features in the right of way, and there is grade change and other situations that are not uncommon for access, to properties all across town. But those items would be something that would be further evaluated and further designed at the, future stage. And we're not there right now. There's a sidewalk on the west side of South Road. There's a stone wall along the property, and there is an elevation that comes from South Road up into the property through the frontage. So those are all things that would have to be designed during the site plan process, and obviously fleshed out with the Public Services Department during the road opening permits and curb cut permits.
Just concern or making an applicant aware that if you're creating the division, that's a step development, but you could be constrained by sight line and access to the site. And I don't think you have a vested right to say you've divided it, you've determined it's buildable, and then you don't have proper sightline.
Yeah, there's no issue with sightline. I mean, because there's the ability to mitigate any circumstances with the sightline. I mean, it's a straight road through there. I mean, I don't understand what I'd be looking at right now, but it's nothing that's not possible going forward.
All right, thank you.
Josh, is that a stone wall I'm looking at on the South Road side?
It is. Right along the property frontage.
Yep.
How about trees in the right of way, either in front of that lot or up gradient or down gradient that would impact either access or sight distance?
There may be some trees within the property at where that driveway location could be that will need to be cleared to establish an adequate visual or a preferred visual. The tree line is right at the back of the stone wall right now. Obviously, there's a process for both the tree removal if necessary, a permit, or possible just relocation of the proposed driveway when they go to get their physical alteration permit.
But how
So
about sight distance, Josh, for trees in the right of way, either north or south of the subject lot that would need to be removed to provide adequate sight distance?
Yeah, I don't see, because of the geometry of the frontage and the fact that it's almost 135 feet. Like when we were out there doing test holes, we had 2 or 3 locations that could be suitable without a significant lift as far as tree removal. One of them we actually looked at was toward the south of the frontage. That's probably the ideal location for a future driveway. But there were a couple other options as well.
This is Rich Bourbonnais. This is a really long, very straight, somewhat flat section of road. I don't think that sight distance is going to be an issue overall. I think that, much of the vegetation, the larger stuff, doesn't appear to be in the right of way, and it seems like most of it's behind the wall. And if you were having trouble, getting out of your own driveway, which they may, and they can always, make those corrections. I don't know that access is an issue here, frankly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we had the same sentiments when we visited the site. I agree with Rich's analysis there.
Josh, do you know whether this lot, the original lot, was created as part of the Teftail subdivision?
I believe it was. I think Rick, do you recall? I know you looked at your documents. Is that accurate? What Mr. Murphy's suggesting?
So the original 15 or 16 lots that front South Road were part of the original Teftail Farm subdivision prior to the initial phase 1 of Teftail.
So I guess I would ask whether staff or anyone
That
has
answers the
gone.
question.
Has staff or anyone else gone back to look at the original subdivision approval to see if there's any conditions of approval regarding buffer on South Road or any other conditions that may be applicable to this lot?
I'll defer that to Mr. Parker.
That's a good question. No, we have not, but we certainly can take a look at that to see if there's any outstanding issues that might impact this.
Yeah, I'd request that you review the original conditions.
Joe, just on
struggle to
that
think-
point.
I mean, I struggle, I'm struggling to say, I can't believe the original developer didn't cut off frontage lots if he had that ability back then. So I think that's where you're going, Joe. I mean, it's very surprising to me that we don't have frontage lots for these 4 or 5 properties that front on Kensington and South Road as part of the original subdivision. To me, maybe I'm wrong, but there was probably a reason why that didn't happen back then. So I think a file review of the Teftil subdivision is imperative.
Myself. as well.
Joe, just so you know, we did, there's one of the things that I actually brought up when I evaluated the project for the Angeles. And then Rick provided some of the covenants and the documents from the recorded approvals. And although obviously we don't have an attorney here representing the project right this second, an attorney was given those documents to provide a cursory review just to make sure that there were no restrictions and requirements that would have already prevented this from occurring. And the attorney's opinion after reading those, which I would assume would be the same opinion found by the town, I guess, at this point, was that there were no issues and no restrictions that would not allow this to move forward. John brings up a great point. I said to myself, I said, geez, a couple of these other lots look like they could have done the same thing based on their area and frontage. I guess maybe they just haven't chosen to do so, but I did have the same questions myself. That's what but we walked it through, and we believe that there are no issues, but I'm happy to provide the documents that we were given to planning staff, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose, and I think that would in our review.
Okay.
I guess what I'm hearing is a couple members would appreciate a little more thorough review by planning department staff along with engineering to look at the original approval associated with this. The owner and applicant, Rick, has stated that there's no immediate intention to build on that site. So unless someone's prepared to make a motion to move that along, I think the suggestion is to table this, add it to our agenda in March, and have a conversation with Mr. Rosen as well as the applicant on whether there were any provisions associated with the original approval that would hinder access on South Road.
And if there is anything in those original documents and those conditions to be shown on the plan, such as a buffer, when it comes back.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, can I make a request that, you guys consider a motion to move this to the planning board or on its next agenda, subject to that review? And if there's anything different as far as a conclusion other than what we've sort of presented, that we come back to TRC. This application has also been submitted, and it's been there for a few weeks. And if that was going to be a prime issue, I would have hoped the town would have looked at that on their end already. Also, all I'm saying is, if nothing comes up, if that comes back clean, I don't see a need for us to come back to the TRC if that's what you're suggesting.
But before you go there, the parcel in its entirety is located in the future sewer service district, and it's less than 300 feet from the Windmill Drive South Road intersection, and that manhole is relatively deep. So you're going to have to do the sewer feasibility study. It could be in letter form, Josh. I know you did one recently. So we're going to still need a sewer feasibility study.
Okay.
Jay, Parker, from a timing standpoint, we have a planning board regularly scheduled meeting in 2 weeks, correct?
We do, but applications don't go to planning board and TRC in the same month. So this would be scheduled for the March 23rd meeting.
So, Mr. Rosen, we would Jay, would we have an opportunity if this was tabled in March to go March to March?
Possibly. You could also consider making the motion that if it comes back clean, as Mr. Rosen said from our review, that it could go directly to planning board and not return to TRC, or simply have it returned to TRC regardless of staff's outcome.
And I feel relatively comfortable that if TRC points out the issue, and to Jay's point, it doesn't come back, use the terminology clean, that will just affect or delay the permitting process with the planning board. And Josh, you'll have to figure out potentially, worst case, there's, an easement there, or protective easement that doesn't allow the access. You would have to look at alternative access. I mean, you're comfortable with if that scenario arise?
Yes.
Okay. I'll turn to John and Rich on that because they're in control of the tie-in to the road system. John, would you be comfortable with that, Rich?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry, John.
I guess what I'm struggling with, the applicant says it's not an urgent matter. So a feasibility study, we can certainly, make another field review of the access. And to me, this, whatever that subdivision Teft Hill documents prove is, I don't see as a month extension until we have that information before us as being unreasonable. That's just my opinion.
The landowner and applicant on the line, Mr. Angeli?
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts tonight? This is how,
Yes. So
I'm so used to night meetings, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. I have gone through a review of the covenants and restrictions that were placed upon the original lots back, I believe it in the around the time of the original Teft Hill Farm creation. Went through a review of those documents. I have those documents that can be provided to you. The first question is, would you like me to provide those to you, or is the town going to go through its own process in terms of search for those documents? I had provided those documents to the law firm that originally created the Teft Hill property. They aren't currently representing me, but gave me their opinion that there are no existing restrictions or covenants on the property that would
Rick, we lost you for a moment.
from being as a separate lot. Can you hear me now?
A little bit, yeah. We lost about the last minute.
Okay. What I was getting at was I had provided the restrictions and covenants to the attorney's office that was involved in the creation of Teft Hill and the documentation and the subdivision. They don't currently represent me, however, provided their opinion that there are no restrictions that would prevent us moving forward with the development of that particular lot. But certainly appreciate the planning board going through their review of that, and I can provide the documents or however you want us to proceed with respect to that.
Yep. Rick, our department would do an independent review, but any information you have, we would appreciate.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
We won't solely rely on that, but if you've already put some stuff together, that'd be wonderful if you could share that.
yeah, pretty much the stuff I have is the stuff you have access to. You know, we probably got it from the same place. Okay.
Again,
Thanks.
from my perspective, along with John Chalk, it's easy to continue the discussion and potentially not move forward and then take a step backwards. I think we end up at the same place. There's a possibility, as Mr. Parker stated, that if we can resolve this at the next TRC, we can potentially try and move it along to the planning board meeting, which would follow literally 10 days after the meeting in March with TRC. About that time frame, Jay?
Yeah, James, I just want to be clear, Jamie, that Mr. Angeli understands that process, because we're sitting here today and we're hearing that, you know, best case scenario, we wouldn't be on a February planning board meeting. So you're asking the TRC to consider tabling the TRC till March, which by that same reasoning, we wouldn't expect to be on March's planning board meeting if we do that. Therefore, we're looking at, in that scenario, an April planning board meeting for a 2-lot minor subdivision with existing frontage on an already improved street that meets all of the zoning requirements. I just want to make sure that that's the case and that just the applicant understands that time frame, because that's the way I see it, and I just want him to know, before, you know, that's the situation. So, Rick, do you understand what the process is, I guess?
Yeah, I understand.
Are you okay with that process then?
Well, I
That
mean,
timing?
you know, I want to work with the town and let them get, you know, do the proper review that they you know want to do, right? We want to be a good landowner and a good partner. You know, I certainly, you know, I don't think the issue is whether there's urgency or there's not urgency in terms of, you know, because there is no plan at this point for the, you know, for the lot. But I think in terms of the expediency of what the review, of getting that review done, and if it can be done, you know, and get on an earlier agenda, then, you know, that would be preferred. But, you know, I'm appreciative of the, you know, of the board's work, and, you know, we're willing to do what we need to do.
Okay, perfect.
And to Jay's point, Ms. Rosen, we're typically, from a procedural standpoint, the first time at TRC typically doesn't move to 10 days later at the. This will be the second time that he has seen it. We're really trying to resolve potentially 2 issues. The point that Mr. Schock brought up about the sewer feasibility and the potential time, providing that information, as well as resolving restriction on the tie-in. So those are really 2 boxes I think the TRC would be more comfortable checking before we move it to the planning board. But if we check those 2 boxes, unless Mr. Parker starts shaking his head no, we potentially could try and expedite this and move it to the planning board in March.
All right, sounds good.
Mr. Rosen, I see no reason why staff can't get the review done to answer the questions early enough to have it teed up and ready to go for March. Since we've already seen this and it's an outstanding question that may result in no issues. So, I mean, I see no reason to hold up a project that has no issues for an additional month just because. We can be prepared to have it ready for the March agenda, provided there aren't any outstanding issues and we can get the sewer feasibility question resolved.
Okay, great. John,
It's not our intent to hold this up or delay it. It's just we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's on your behalf as well as the town's.
That's perfect. I just, like I said, I want to make sure the applicant understood it. I think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think this might be his first time through this kind of process. I just want to make sure he knew what's going on. And John, if you're still out there, if I get you the sewer feasibility study, say in a week from today, does that give you enough time to also do your review of that prior to this TRC in March?
Yep, we can get it done by then.
Okay, cool. I'll plan to do that then. Thanks.
And again, Mr. Angeli told me he was bringing in a simple one about a month ago. Perhaps it's not quite that simple, but again, Rick, we'll do our best to get you through the process.
Yeah. No, I appreciate everyone's work on this, and Josh is right. It is my first time, so you know, I'm learning as we go. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. All right, with that being said, do I have a motion to table?
So moved.
Second,
I'll just simply do, all those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Aye. Okay. Seeing all the hands raised, motion to table. So we will see Mr. Angeli and Mr. Rosen next month.
Okay, sounds good.
And Rick, if you have stuff, you know,
Thank you.
town hall is available on appointment. We have at least one staff member in the department daily. So if you make a call or email Jay or Mike, we'll make sure you can arrange to drop those documents off.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
I'm Josh.
Bear with me, everybody. Just bear with me. I just lost my agenda. Okay, next agenda item from memory is Plant-Based Compassion Center.
Correct.
That is correct.
Could you, Jake, while I'm pulling that up, could you just read off that agenda item for me?
Yep.
You have that in front of you?
Yes. This is a development plan review application advisory to zoning, plant-based compassionate care incorporated, proposed change of use to medical marijuana compassion center, use code 100, with waivers from landscaping requirements, the subdivision regulations, advisory to the zoning board on required special use permit assessors plat 57-2, lot 20, located at 71 Old Tower Hill Road, plant-based compassionate care incorporated, applicant Brian McLaughlin, owner.
And Jay, I believe we should have people in the audience.
Yes, Mr. Landry is coming in. I've got Mr. Landry, and Mr. Landry, if you could unmute yourself, or Ben, and Ben as well.
Yes, I'm here, sir.
We also have a phone-in caller. Can you identify yourself?
Mike Kahn from Tupelo.
Right.
And Jay, Mike has a hard out at 10. If you guys don't mind, if we could get him to just explain some of the changes that he made before he has to go, and then we can take over from there if that works with the board.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful if you could, this was a continuation from the last time you were before the TRC. If you could just outline what changes have been made, or if Mr. Landry could outline what changes have been made since then that are reflected in the revised submission documents that you guys have provided.
Jay, I know that Mike has to leave in 5 minutes, so I'm gonna ask him to provide a quick summary, but I'm aware of what he's presenting and we'll be able to follow up as necessary if he can't complete his summary within those 5 minutes.
Hi, everyone. So, in broad strokes, what we've done is increase the plant bed screening on the east and the south sides. And to achieve that on both of those sides, we're proposing, with the approval, that we could actually remove a section of the existing pavement to increase the plant beds into onto our lot and maintain that full 10 feet on those two sides. Along the street side, we added a elevation in the upper right corner of P1 to illustrate how we plan on maintaining not only the plant bed but the sight lines. I know last time there was some question as to whether or not like the plant material and how that was going to work and whether or not that would block any of the sight lines. But I feel like that elevation should kind of, point out to everyone that's a standard, 4-door sedan. So it's low to the ground, and it's kind of based on all the elevations that we had from Dave Hilbern's survey. And then in addition, I know last time there was some discussion of possible overflow parking in some of the spaces along the west side of the D'Angelo's. So we've added some of the lower shrub plant material along that entire side, which that plant bed's predominantly empty at the moment, just to supplement that and add additional screening along Pershing there. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Mike, Jamie Rabbit, Planning Director.
Yep.
In revising your landscape plan as it relates to sightline, did the traffic engineer or PE provide you with sightline triangles so you knew where those potential conflicts would exist?
Yeah, we have a traffic, where are we? There is a traffic study that I know is going to be part of today's presentation from, what is it, Terra Corporation? That talks about that stuff a little bit more. And then I just checked the standards from highway departments and pulled everything that we had as far as what the sightlines were going to be. And then checked with the town's regulations for the distances that the town was looking to maintain. And then just compare that to heights, the plant material that could happen within which areas, and then basically went from there.
So that, just for clarity, that was a longer
There's a
that you didn't overlay sightline triangles.
There is a traffic study that will be part of today's thing, and like we did look at the traffic triangle, like the vision triangles and things that you would need in order to be able to maintain those sight lines from a vehicle.
Okay, good. Looking at the traffic study, I didn't see any plan profile aspects associated with the sightline triangle, only a discussion of the dimensions.
Right, and then all of those standards that would have normally been looked at through, I mean, I could look at, I think it's ASHTO and we pulled one other sightline description, and then we applied that in CAD. We didn't represent it on the planting plan. We just made sure that we were going to have everybody be clear.
Okay.
Are you saying you would want to see that on a plan in order to verify it? Yes.
To me, that's the simplest way. If you're still proposing to plant 6 viburnum in that front landscape island, if I'm looking to the east are any of those viburnums in that sightline triangle? And if they are, what's the proposal as far as maintaining height? Because in your graphic representation of the car, if that viburnum that you're showing by the rear portion of the car is within that sightline triangle, I'm not going to be able to see an approaching car because I can't see the back of the car parked. So if there's an approaching car behind that, there's a potential conflict. And seeing those sightline triangles is a very simple way to determine whether there is or isn't a conflict.
Okay, well, I mean, we could add a plan for the review when it gets that far, if that's a concern. These viburnums, on view one, we did call out that they've got to be maintained in 4 to 5 feet to make sure that they stay out of, everyone's sight lines. But as Ben said and as Bill said, I've got to hop off.
Yeah.
Which I know is not tremendously helpful right this minute, but
no, but that's fine, Mike. Thank you. I'm sure the traffic engineer will address it further.
Yeah, if we could let in
Okay.
John Shevlin, who's on hold, I think he can answer a lot of these potential questions for you guys.
We do appreciate your efforts with the revisions to the landscape plan.
all right, thank you. Talk to you later.
If I may, Mr. Rabbit, this is Bill Landry speaking. We do have John Shevlin here, but there were some issues related to landscaping and loading spaces that Mr. Khan unfortunately was not able to describe to you himself because of his conflict. And unless you have a different preference, I think it might be good to stick with just presenting what's new here in terms of landscape loading space analysis on the plans, and then we'll have Mr. Shevlin as part of that's actually the first part of his traffic presentation is going to be to address the sightline issues that you raised, particularly as they relate to this east side of Pershing Avenue.
Yeah, no, I think early on, and Bill, I think it would be good that if you gave a synopsis of the changes, and then we'll work through the details of those.
Thank you. As Mike mentioned, those planting beds on the east side of Pershing, sort of, on our particular parcel were of great attention, but also further north to the west of the D'Angelo's building, presently an unscreened area. Those are potential overflow spaces there. My client has the right to all 32 spaces on the D'Angelo's lot. I think we all agreed that it's probably more likely that anyone using the Compassion Center, would, if there's a need for overflow, would be in that area along Pershing. So we have also provided the supplemental plantings there. The other issue a couple other issues came up last time. One was making sure that the landscaping plan was in sync with the site plan, the surveyed site plan that was done by Mr. Hilburn. That wasn't entirely clear when we were before you the last time in December. But Mr. Khan assures me that was the starting point for all of this analysis, was the survey plan and the lot lines represented here on this plan are taken precisely from the survey plan. The only thing he did was to make them a little bolder so that they can be more visible, but their locations haven't changed at all. And then we had the issue of the loading space. And the presentation made back in December was that we've got a use here that is served by a van. There are no significant deliveries. It's going to be a van, in all likelihood, arriving even before the facility is open, which is not going to be until 10 o'clock in the morning, the opening time, that could easily fit into any one of the parking spaces here that would not be in use. So, I know that it's a discretionary issue with the planning board and as part of the TRC's advisory review as to whether there is a loading zone, but I think there's a good case here that a loading space is a second loading space on this overall lot is really not necessary. But having said that, there are two options for us here. The first is to use the existing loading space that D'Angelo's uses quite sparingly and which is almost never used. And that loading area is right in the middle of what's on your screen right now, that space between the proposed Compassion Center parcel and the back of the D'Angelo's. And that space is also occupied by a dumpster. And the entrance into the tract from Pershing is curved here to facilitate the backing in of a truck into that loading space. So it's a really good, usable loading space with a great history of use and underutilized use that's sort of right between the two uses on the property. And we think that, to the extent that we are required to have one, we certainly have the right to share that space, and that could be our official loading space, recognizing that the small vans that are delivering things to this use are probably not going to back down or even enter that, but they'll park in one of these parking spaces, do what they have to do, and leave. Now, there's a second option as well. The problem with the first option, if it is a problem, is that it well satisfies the requirements for a loading space. It's larger and wider than 12 by 60, but it's not screened from Pershing Avenue. And part of your regulations require a visual screen from a loading space. And to place a visual screen here would be to, defeat the purpose, to defeat the access to the parcel. So we need to request a waiver on that if this is the loading space that we're going to be relying on for this particular use as well. The second option is down in the southeast corner of the parcel, the back corner to the right as facing the building from Pershing Avenue. As you can see, there's a handicap space there, and then there's just a big empty area to the south of the building. And that's not big enough to meet in full the requirements for a loading space. It's probably more like 40 feet than 60 feet. I'm sorry, 48 or 50 feet rather than 60 feet. And it is wider than 12 feet, but it technically would require a waiver of the size requirement for a loading space. But, again, if that would seem to be in order, given the size of the vehicle that would be used to make deliveries to this location. And we'd really end up with, effectively two loading spaces that would be available to this use. So that's what we're dealing with the loading space, either a waiver from the screening requirement for the existing loading space, or a waiver from the size requirement for what could be an additional area dedicated to loading. So I think that was the only.
I just have two quick things I think we should add to that. Just the fact that we would be doing all our deliveries and everything else for our product itself. So it would be based on our hours, which we would do obviously before we would be open. And I think that space measured, we measured it yesterday, and it came out to 54 feet. So it's just 6 feet under the requirement, that second loading area near view 3. So I just wanted to update those two things. And Bill, I think the last one, which I'm not sure you mentioned, was the extension of that curb to ensure that we always hit that 10-foot requirement from the city.
Yeah, that's right. We were trying to absolutely make sure that we had 10 feet of buffer on the south and west sides of the parcel. And that will require a little bit of elimination of paving area to make sure we've got the full 10 feet. But that, as shown on the plan, that is part of the proposal, and it doesn't affect the compliance of the parking spaces with their required width and depth. So I think that's everything we have. I on the landscaping issue, as regards the site itself, I think Jay raised the issue last time of the lighting and, you know, whether it would be properly shielded, and the lighting schedule and specification that we provided did not include the shields that are associated with that lighting that are swiveled and can be pointed down. And there was a photometric plan that we did submit last time that showed that the lighting would be confined to the site, but we have also in our supplemental submission included the specifications showing the actual shields to just confirm that we have the physical capacity to face all of our lighting downward in the way that we plan to. And so that would leave Mr. Shevlin, who is going to address a couple of things that required a little more work after the report that he submitted and presented in December. And the first was what we've started to discuss, the site distances, but also trip generation and additional comparable data to support assumptions and to refine assumptions regarding trip generation and traffic capacity. And that corresponds to the issue of parking. You know, if that supplemental analysis revealed an additional need for additional traffic flows, there'd have to be some additional efforts taken to address parking. But again, we think we've got more than enough parking with the overflow area that we have. But I'll ask Mr. Shevlin to go through those issues and to take you in summary fashion through the supplemental report that he's filed dated January 25th.
Thank you, Bill, and good morning, everybody. As Bill just mentioned, you know, we did go ahead and take a look at the site distance. We did go ahead and talk with the landscape architect, talked about the plantings that he was proposing, the location that he was looking to go ahead and put them in the bed. It looks like he's putting them back about 9 feet back from the curb line, so they were set back along that lines. We did take a look at the site distance as far as looking at the stopping site distance and the intersection site distance. We went ahead, we looked at the posted speed limit out there is 25 miles per hour, as I discussed last time. We took a look in regards to what the speeds are in that area, and because of the location of where this driveway is, as far as approaching Old Tower Hill Road and from leaving Old Tower Hill Road, 25-mile-an-hour speeds seem to be conservative. Like I said, the cars are definitely slowing down as they're coming towards this intersection, and they are in their accelerating mode as they start from the intersection. So we looked at that as far as looking at the speed with the 25, and based on looking at AASHTO for that speed limit, you know, the stopping site distance, we exceed that. To the intersection, we have just a little over 200 feet or so for the stopping site distance. And then looking at looking to the south in the opposite direction, we can see up to about Arnold Road, which is about 280 feet. So I think we are able to go ahead and meet the stopping site distance or exceed the stopping site distance, and we're just able to meet the intersection site distance as well. So we feel that the site distance that's out there, as long as the landscaping is properly maintained, the sight lines are kept at the intersection, we feel that we can go ahead and meet the requirements of ASHTO for that. Just reiterate, ASHTO, states in there that as long as we're able to meet the stopping sight distance, they feel that there's sufficient time and distance to avoid and anticipate any collision. So we feel that's a safe intersection that will be able to go ahead and operate appropriately with the speeds that are out there. So if you want to ask any questions in regards to that, if you want me to just continue in regards to the other 3 points that Mr. Landry brought up.
I think, Mr. Shevlin, if you want to continue, we'll
Sure. So
I'm
at
sure
the,
we'll have questions after.
absolutely. No, and at the last meeting, I know the other item that came up, or one of the other items that came up, was trip generations. If you recall in that report, we went ahead, we had trip generations based on the industry standard with ITE, which is a publication put out by engineers, planners, architects in regards to looking at different land uses throughout the country and coming up with an average factor for trips. It was felt that those volumes may be low, so we did take a look at a similar site that's occurring right now in Rhode Island, down in Portsmouth. We did counts down in that area just to see what the counts were during the peak hours at that facility, and that's on West Main Road. And based on that, the volumes were higher than what ITE generated. We came up with 134 trips, with 67 trips going in and going out during the peak hour. We also did some research in regards to some other studies, and I know there's a study I believe was submitted to the town, which also looked at the same facility, and the trips that they came up were similar. They had 135 trips during the peak hour, with 63 trips coming in, 72 trips going out. So we went ahead, we took a look at those volumes, and I know one of the other items that came up was in regards to looking at access coming out from Pershing onto Old Tower Hill Road. So we did a traffic capacity analysis as was requested, and we did the analysis in regards to the intersection and how it operates. Under the existing conditions, when we analyzed it, we found that the existing movement out of Pershing is level service B with about 25-second delay. And then with the additional traffic that we added on there, and just so everybody's knows how we went and we split the traffic, we took what we thought may be a conservative, we don't know, but we thought we applied 75% of the traffic from this development going to that intersection. Is it going to be somewhat different between, 50-50? Is it going to be, 80-20? We thought 75-25 was a good split for the analysis, not knowing exactly where they're going to be coming from. So with that analysis, we showed that there was an increase in delay by about 14 seconds. But again, we feel like that's based on our traffic capacity analysis software. But there are signalized intersections on both sides of Pershing, which we feel does help in regards to getting the traffic into the traffic stream. But on a conservative side, we feel that the worst case condition, we're going to be increasing delay coming out of the Pershing Ave intersection by 14 seconds. And then the last thing that was mentioned was in regards to the parking. Again, we looked back in regards to how a lot of other similar facilities operate and the amount of time that customers spend inside there. We feel that with the parking that's being supplied with the 19 spaces, that we can meet that requirements. They do have the overflow parking as necessary. But we also worked with the applicant in regards to if that ever did become an issue, and he has a lot of different mechanisms that he is willing to incorporate into his operations. One is a pretty robust pre-ordering process that you could put to play, which will certainly reduce any amount of time that anybody needs to spend at the site. Like I said, what we found typically is it's about 15 minutes that somebody spends on site, but with a pre-order, it's going to be ordered online or by phone order. Their customers are able to go in there and just go to an express lane and pick those up, significantly reduce the amount of time that they would have there. In addition to the pre-ordering, I know they talked about consultation that they provide, which would be more one-on-one through Zoom meetings or whatever, so people know exactly what they're looking for, but they go in there, which also helps reduce time, and it's also incorporated into the pre-order process, so that allows them to pre-order. The applicant in discussions, has talked about going ahead and, if necessary, as far as if it is needed for helping direct traffic, they will have their own staff, but they're more than willing to go ahead and bring on any backup as far as South Kingstown police officer in order to go ahead and help with the traffic or parking issues if they ever do exist. So the bottom line is just based on what we found for industry standards, based on town standards, and what they're supplying. We feel like the parking right now is sufficient, particularly in regards to having the overflow parking that could be provided if they ever did need it. So that's a quick summary, I think, in the 4 items that were asked at the last meeting. And with that, I'll open up to any questions.
I have one question, John and Bill. It's been mentioned several times now about the ability of the property, the ability of this use to use the parking on for the D'Angelo's side of the building. Have you guys looked at the zoning requirements for those uses and whether or not there are extra spaces there that can accommodate the overflow parking? In other words, are those spaces already accounted for with the existing uses?
They're not, Jay. We submitted a schedule with the original submission that had a schedule of what was required and provided. And we're talking about either that the other site has got 3,600 square feet of retail and 3,600 square feet of fast food. There are 11 spaces required for both. So they have a requirement of 22 spaces. And there are 52 spaces on the lot. If we're taking 19, then there's a substantial additional availability for other spaces on the property.
Okay, thank you.
We also, if you apply the requirements to our lot, 200 square feet per gross linear footprint area, gross leased floor area rather, that comes out to 7 spaces for our property. Now, there was some statements made at the last TRC that probably didn't contemplate this type of use. And I think those were fair comments that, a compassion center may not be like a convenience store or a D'Angelo. So, we didn't try to go for the minimum. We're almost 3 times what the ordinance requirement would be for that space. And the special pre-ordering that John mentioned, it may have sounded like an aspiration that may fly or may not fly, but what he didn't mention was that there's a 20% discount associated with pre-ordering. And so, with everything everybody does online these days, we think that's going to have a tremendous impact in how many people are in the building at one time. There's a significant financial incentive that's being applied to keeping that number as low as possible, and we think it's going to work. Also, I think it was Rich Bourbonnais, who may not be on the call now, was especially concerned about what could happen if there was recreational marijuana, and I think we also agree that that's a legitimate point to make. But it is true that use doesn't exist within the town. This use does, and our comparable data has been based on medical marijuana use. If the state someday comes around to allowing recreational marijuana, and if the towns have an option to have it or not have it, as they do with medical marijuana, they also have the ability to attach requirements to that may or may not be the same requirements that are applicable to medical marijuana. They probably aren't, but that would be a change of use from what we have here, and we'd have to go through this same process at that time. So, the notion, I think, is accurate, but I think the requirement here is to make sure that, we've probably got more than we need for what we're proposing. And that's what my client has tried to do. And my client, this is not their first rodeo. They're very much involved in managing other facilities. They've got a lot of other experience here in Rhode Island and elsewhere operating these facilities, and feel, you know, blessed with the great number of spaces that they have available for this particular location.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, you know, we have a retail operation in Only, Maryland, which is a similar kind of suburb of Washington, D.C. And we've been implementing this pre-order package with a significant discount, especially in the first 6 months of operation, getting patients accustomed to the process. And, you know, once they understand how quick and easy things can move, it's usually the way they move forward, you know, past that time frame. So, you know, obviously, if you guys have any questions about the operation side of things, you know, please let me know, and I can let you know what we've done in the past. But, you know, it has been a successful process for us in the past, and we're excited to try to do it in South Kingston.
This is Rich Bourbonnais, the town engineer. I just want to keep going on the traffic for 1 second, because I'm more concerned with the proposed numbers as a compassion center than I am with anything else. And a couple questions though. I know you looked at Portsmouth and you did counts. Portsmouth is, I'm going to assume Portsmouth is a bigger facility than this square footage wise. And I think you're basing your numbers on whatever it is, 1,000 square feet, a little more, it's more than that. But, you know, we have gotten other numbers from other proposals in town, and they were double, in fact, 54% more on one of them than what you're suggesting on your numbers. Now, I know your facility, what you're proposing is much smaller than what that is, but it's still a regional facility. And this facility is going to, from what we've been told, is meant to cover from Exeter south, not including, of course, East Bay and the islands, but from Exeter south. That's a pretty big land area. And you know, I'm still a little concerned that you're half those numbers that we've seen on other sites. Can I ask a question though? Is that when you say 134 trips, I believe you might have observed those numbers in Portsmouth, which is a great jumping off point. But how big is Portsmouth?
I believe it was about 3,000 square feet. So I think it was like 3 times the size of this. And one,
right. So, but I'm still a little worried, John, that to expect, you know, well, I mean, a third of the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Rich, but one thing that I look at it as that, you know, right now there's only a few that are in the state. So I would think that when they go ahead and they triple the amount in the state, that the numbers at each facility are going to go ahead and, you know, you talk about regional, but I'm sure there's people who are from South Kingston or whatever that drive over to Quinnipiac Island right now that, you know, will be going here. So I only see the numbers going ahead per facility. And I think they found that up in Massachusetts, which, as I stated in my report, we didn't do counts up in Massachusetts because it's both recreational and medicinal. And,
yeah, right.
You know, that's certainly more customers than what they're going to have for this. So I can only think that, you know, if you have 3 sites right now and the site that we did was, you know, 134 trips, that you increase the number of facilities, that the numbers are only going to be less per facility.
No, that's right. I mean, I get that. But again, I get that, but I still feel like it's still unknown. I mean, we're sort of speculating in a difficult place. And that gets to my next concern is that you're saying how many total customers in a day is expected on like a Saturday or the busiest day? I mean, are we talking 1,000 customers or are we talking 500 customers? Does anybody know that?
And I don't know if you're better to answer that than like I doing the traffic work is really based on peak hour.
That's right. That's right.
So, which I think is like worst case, but
you're even going on your numbers. If you say 46, let's say 46 to 50 in around that range, doesn't sound like a lot of people in the peak hour. You kind of go across the whole day. I mean, you're talking at least a couple hundred customers in a day. Could be.
Yeah, and I think, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the things we discussed, because we did talk about the operations and that, you know, when are the busy times, and it is more around the 3-4 o'clock time, and it's pretty quiet, I believe, from when they open at 11 to, you know, to mid-afternoon or so. But
Yeah,
I was in an office that was 2 doors down from the Providence facility, which was exceptionally busy. And I understand that's kind of off the rails on busyness. I understand we've all talked about that. But how many, do you think a couple hundred? But so my bigger concern here is that if we say 25% and you're expecting, it may be conservative, but 25% are going to be going through the neighborhood in order to get out of there. I mean, that's an additional, 50 cars a day that neighborhood hasn't seen or isn't seeing now. And that's a lot. And, and I've said this about, we've got a problem on Middlebridge Road. It's the speed, everybody says speed. Every study we show is that the 85th percentile speed is not bad. It's in fact lower than what could be expected. The problem I think that they're having down there is a volume problem. If they're seeing a couple thousand cars in a day, which that's what it is, it's very, very high. The one or two that are going really fast, or let's say the 85th percentile that are going fine, but the 15th percentile that are on either end of the spectrum, most aren't low, they're going to be high. That's still a few hundred cars a day. So when it's the perception that this neighborhood's going to have with an extra 100 cars coming through the neighborhood is my bigger concern. And they will go through the neighborhood. Getting out of Pershing is very difficult. Regardless of the stoplights in either direction, there's still a whole lot of activity that happens. Almost all of it is happening between those two stoplights, comings and goings on all these different properties. It's all going through that center section.
Hi, Mom.
Hi.
That's all I've got. I mean, I still have a big concern about the numbers.
Jamie?
Yeah,
I do respect, but I'm sorry, Joe. I do respect the effort in the preparation of this. It does, I think, clarify a whole number of thoughts. Anyways, thank you.
thank you.
Rich, let me share two other things with you. One, we heard a little bit about the bagel shop as being a destination within the neighborhood. We've learned they're closed by 3:00. We didn't know that back in December, so that they would not be competing with our PM peak, and most of their activity there is in the morning peak, the donuts and coffee and so forth, and this location isn't going to open till 10:00. So I think it's going to avoid the heaviest time of traffic. And the fact that there's a large area that's covered here, this is medical marijuana. The base of people who are qualified to purchase medical marijuana, has not exploded over the last couple of years. That base is statewide, and now they're going to have a much greater number of locations to serve that population. I think that would be more of a concern if we're talking about recreational marijuana. This is a limited patient base.
Jamie? This is Joe. We've had at least, I think, 4 projects that's come in front of us, the planning board, all of them being for medical marijuana, all of them being serving, I think, obviously the same geographic area. The issue of traffic has become a bigger and bigger issue, and truthfully taken more and more discussion. And the differences between each proposal has become a pretty big discussion topic itself. I wonder, Jamie, if it's possible that whether it be Rich or Jay, talk to Amy, look at the different proposals and come back and say, this is the minimum traffic that we want you to plan on. Again, I think the amount of traffic it's going to generate is really based on the geographic area, not necessarily the size of the property. So I think that would be reasonable for that to be consistently evaluated.
And sorry, I just wanted to add one last thing. I believe one of the traffic count numbers that John was using was from a submitted and passed Compassion Center similar application that we used. So we used an application numbers that approved group was already used and went through with you guys. So just wanted to kind of reiterate that.
Yeah, that's actually the facility that's at 7-Eleven Kingstown Road that we went ahead. We were able to get our hands on that report. So we took a look to see what they had, and they actually went in, they used counts, like I said, from the same facility in Portsmouth. Except for the distribution, the total volumes were pretty close. They had 135, we had 134 that we counted.
I just wanted to say that, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think that type of analysis, to come up with an expected or anticipated traffic load based off of the averages of what we've seen or other information would prove extremely difficult, particularly with the fact that, right now there are 3 in the state where that number is going to be increased. It's anticipated that the newer compassion centers would serve have more of a regional presence. However, someone from Woonsocket traveling to the beach would be able to stop and go to one in South County somewhere also. So there isn't really a great mechanism to figure out a formula to come up with a comfortable number in my eyes. But again, I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't know the answer to that. We can certainly look at it and identify, maybe the discrepancies or the differentiations between the different applications. But to come up with a number that we might feel comfortable with or anticipate in excess or different from what an expert on an application provides, I think is a little difficult.
I just wanted to add one last thing. The regional component of this application is just on the RFA and how they wanted to have geographic disbursement so that medication would be available throughout the entire state. We just have to keep on reminding ourselves that it's currently, the X amount of patients that we have in the state is being serviced by 3. That number is going to be pushed up to 9. And I do understand that the population of, the South County is, a decent size. But, that doesn't mean that everybody in South County works in South County. A lot of people go to Providence, and you see the, input of what's happening in that Providence Compassion Center. So I just think it's important to just realize that the market's going to be increasing 300% with 9 from 3, and that patients are going to be spread out significantly more than they currently are.
This is David Flanders. Picking up on Jay's point about somebody from Woonsocket stopping down here on their way to the beach, would it, first of all, is it in our bailiwick to suggest that, like with a pharmacy and picking up a prescription, that the patient would register with a particular compassion center, and that way we would have a much better idea of exact numbers?
Yeah.
Is that something we can do?
David, I think that's a good idea. I'm not sure we have the regulatory ability to do that.
Yep, I know, yep.
So
valid point.
Can I take a few moments, so not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, parking, I think that GIS photo that Jay had up is pretty telling. I don't know if you can put that back up again, Jay. I mean, on a regular day at lunchtime, probably between 11:30 and 2, there is virtually no parking. I know people stop parking along Pershing. And I'm curious, it says there is also an agreement with the plaza owner, if necessary. I mean, can we get a copy of that agreement?
Yeah, we submitted that with the initial application.
Okay, we'll go back and look at that. But I guess I have a real cause for concern during peak times of other business entities. There is virtually no parking to begin with. Never mind picking up additional parking that would be associated with this project. And secondly, I mean, I look at page 5 of the report, there's an estimates, assumptions, expected to decrease, the 6 months of operation, the 20% discounts only for 6 months. It says here the applicant is open to hiring a South Kingston police officer if necessary. It's very open-ended in my mind and not very definitive. And there's a lot of assumptions being made. I just have a real concern with parking and in traffic. I just,
Yeah,
And-
John, so, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, in the traffic report, I was, this is based on discussions with the owner in regards to what he could do. I didn't want to write in the traffic store and make any commitments, but I think that's, Ben can go ahead and certainly talk about those in regards to him being committed to all these things. But I just wanted just a word in regards to this, is what he has done at other facilities, and this is what, he is willing to do. And I'll leave it up to him in regards to the commitment. I think he is committed in order to go ahead and implement these things.
Yeah,
But
all those things would be just, I said it that way just to make sure that it was working appropriately and all those different things. I have no problem, keeping that discount the entire time to making sure that everybody is, doing this pre-order system and moving quickly. The other thing, obviously, D'Angelo's, as you mentioned, is like a 12 to 2 peak hours. Our peak hours are usually between like 3 and 6:30, 3 and 7. So the peak hours would be, different than that. And lastly, the owner of D'Angelo's is the owner of the building in both buildings itself. And he was very open with, us using that overflow spaces whenever it's necessary.
I just want to add to that, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would expect that if we say we're going to do something, that would be reflected in any recommendation that the TRC makes and in any consideration that the planning board gives to conditions. That, if it turns out that there's a problem here, that this applicant would agree to pay for a police detail to help mitigate that situation if it were to ever come up, and during the intervals in which it comes up in an unexpected way, and that could be reflected as a condition of approval. I mean, there's not much else we can do. I think everybody's right that we don't know exactly what's going to happen here. The applicant has more experience than anyone else on the line, and they wouldn't have focused on this location. They had a lot of choices, and they feel very comfortable about where this is. We've got more than all of the standards. The trip generation that John did for ITE trip generation from marijuana facilities, not necessarily limited to medical, that takes data from all over the country. We're up and above beyond that. We've got overflow areas. I think, we've done everything we can to try to accommodate the potential that the flows here will be greater than what the data, than even what the data shows for this type of use. So, and then we've got a safety valve with the police detail. So I think that's everything an applicant can do.
Is the applicant open to, as a condition of approval, revisiting the traffic issue if police details are out there and it's still gridlock, and if there is not sufficient parking?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about, yes, I mean, we would be open to potentially, revisiting that if it becomes a major issue. There's other options that we could take regarding just appointment only and trying to drive traffic at different hours of when there potentially might be a peak of other, locations. And yeah, we are absolutely open to that. And, lastly, like, we don't know when this satellite photo of D'Angelo's was taken. It could have been, a couple of years ago, whatever the case may be. I don't, showing that the parking lot is full, if you ever go by there, our space on Pershing Avenue, that space, those areas there's never parking there. And frankly, they're not allowed to. So just wanted to kind of reiterate that as well. But to answer your question, absolutely, the parking detail would not be a problem. And, if there's other steps that we need to take to make the town feel more comfortable and not having an overflow of traffic, we will absolutely take those steps.
Ben, we had, on a recent application, the planning board had suggested a condition to the zoning board that reads, upon request by the police department or the Department of Public Services, the applicant shall shall conduct a post-construction traffic analysis and review to determine if additional traffic safety measures are required. Uh, Is that something that you guys would be okay with?
Sure.
Hey, Jay, all I'd ask is in addition to that, if you could add parking as part of
Okay.
that, not just strictly traffic, but parking as well.
Okay.
John, that's a good observation because on that application that condition was formulated on did not have an issue with regards to a confined area. They had access to a much larger parking field. To a couple points that were made by both the technical review team and the applicant's representatives. You know, we're looking at an aerial photo. We're looking at a building that has a retail use and a restaurant use. And then we're looking at the specifics of what types and kind of corporate entities are in those spaces. I have to remind them, members that it's a retail space and a restaurant space. That restaurant space could become another restaurant tomorrow. It could become something else, and they have a right as an approved restaurant space to be Subway tomorrow versus D'Angelo's, to be Mike's Subs versus D'Angelo's, and the same thing, that retail space can change. So I think the committee's concern about the utilization of this site and the mixed use, the conversation may be relatively appropriate now, but you have to be conscientious of the fact that these are two zoning classifications, restaurant and retail, that no one wants to hand tie the success of any of the businesses here. I think the goal of the committee is to make sure that all three uses can coexist. From a regulatory standpoint, I think it's difficult. I applaud Ben's efforts to look at traffic and offer a discount to try and fluctuate that. But I've been in the planning field for 30 plus years. I'm not sure how we write a condition that requires a facility owner to offer a discount and then enforce that. So I think it's an avenue or vehicle to help control traffic, but I don't think it's a regulatory avenue that the planning board can utilize. And a 20% discount off of what? I can't imagine Jamie Gorman going in and determining whether the 20% discount in order to meet a condition of your traffic, standards is being properly applied. So I think we really need to look at the factual aspects of how big is the parking lot, how many spaces are there, what is the true utilization of the site, and does this all fit with the three proposed uses? I think a few members of the team are struggling with that for the moment. You can look at the aerial photo and says it doesn't work, and then we could pull up another aerial photo when there's half of the space is occupied and says it works. Again, I applaud the applicant for looking at creative ways to perhaps make the site work better, either through appointment only or the discount or limiting hours. John and Rich, at some point, if there's an issue taking a left-hand turn, a simple venue of a sign that says right turn only may encourage people to turn right, but it's really not a traffic control device that prohibits anyone from turning left. It's not, in essence, a ticketable offense, but there are mechanisms to do. I think what the commission and the planning board perhaps will struggle with over time is some of the other sites weren't as constrained as this or had other options available to them with regards to parking and traffic. So again, Mr. Landry and Mr. Shevlin and Ben, your team has done I think a considerable job to try and work harder to address a number of the issues. I'm just not sure if all of the issues will go away given the site conditions, as it moves forward to the planning board.
You mentioned the right turn only. I mean, that could be something that we, working with city police can enforce much stronger, having them presence there as well.
Has anyone talked to SK Police to see if they're, what their availability is to become your traffic control? In order to make it work, if someone's coming to the conclusion that to make this work, it requires an SK police officer, I think SK Police needs to be involved in that discussion. Because that's a commitment by an entity that, no one on this board has control over. Or, I think that has to be vetted a little bit more. And again, I know other sites have offered that also. And I think it's potentially a stopgap and not of permanence. So again, I think you're doing a good job attempting to address all of the issues.
Jamie, I was just going to add those, as far as the parking goes, and based on the observations for the time of turnover, and the number of customers, we assume that the information that we got from Portsmouth is relevant for this site. If it does go more, then we understand that's where we're talking about putting the other measures in place. But if the numbers are there, we feel that the parking with the 19 spaces is sufficient for the amount of traffic they're going to have with the turnover. I think it's certainly going to be sufficient if he does have an express lane coming in to have customers come in and just pick up their order. But I think that's where I think Ben's going in regards if you need to during peak hours. If he had an appointment, he could certainly control in regards to the number of customers that come in an hour. And I think that's where we're going with that. But we feel like with the 19 spaces right now, based on the turnover that we've seen in other sites, and then the number of trips that we projected, which we think are conservative, because we think that the numbers would potentially only go down as you have more facilities within the state. But as been mentioned, that's to be seen. But I don't see with somebody who needs to have a license and a medical card, that the numbers are going to go ahead and be that high at the early point. But
No, I understand, Mr. Shevin. Chris, we haven't heard much from you today. From emergency services, do you have anything, questions, concerns?
No, we have plenty of access, so I don't think there's going to be a problem getting any vehicles in there. We can go right through that. What he was talking about the between D'Angelo's and that building, we can get plenty of access to the fire department. So we're good on that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Jamie Gorman?
I have nothing to add.
So again, we received some revisions to the plan, some updates to the traffic plan. I think there are still potentially some reservations that members of the technical review committee still have. If you just give me a moment, I'll try and summarize. Jay, do we have anyone in the audience?
We do.
Do you want to see if they are any hands to raise and comments on that?
There are no hands currently raised. If anyone in the audience has a question or would like to ask a question of this application, please raise your hand. I see no hands.
All right, thank you, Jay. John and Rich, with regards to traffic, is there anything you feel you need in addition to what you have to potentially make a recommendation out of committee to the planning board? I know you have, there are reservations, but
Yeah, there are reservations. I mean, I think that the information provided in the report is what we'd see in any report. So it's not like there is anything else that can be done. And if they're standing by the numbers, I'm still concerned that the numbers aren't, the numbers may not be correct when this thing is operational, or if it's operational. So the question is just going to be is, excuse me, how can we address any issues should this come online in the future with regard to traffic? That's my big concern. Just we got to be able to do something later on, you know, if there turns out there's an issue out there, significant issue.
I'll
Hey, Jamie.
yes.
Also, like to ask the applicant if it's possible that when they come in front of the planning board, whether they show a lighting level for both the lot and what's spilling out over to the residential lot on the south, and also maybe consider something other than the 20-foot street light that's at the property line there, whether it's possible to go with something a little smaller, and even if it's a couple lights versus that one big 20-footer.
Yes, Joe, we will certainly do that. We did submit a photometric plan with the original application and some supplemental materials. It's our understanding everything's dark sky compliant, but we also appreciate that you're as interested in the neighborhood as the sky, and so are we. And so we've got these shields that are downward facing. Everything's downward facing. There are just a couple of packs on the building themselves, again, downward facing, covering a very limited area. But we'll do as thorough a job as we can at planning and explaining to you everything we've tried to do here in two passes to try to get the least offensive lighting program here, and at the same time have some reasonable measure of security.
Yeah, and if you're able to, at the planning board, discuss which lights would be under in operations and which one you can shut down late at night or early in the morning that still meet the security requirements, but maybe at a reduced level from your operation. If you're able to have that discussion, that would be appreciated at the board.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'll attempt to summarize some of the discussion. With any favorable motion to pass this along to the planning board was just a little maybe deeper dive into the traffic number comparisons between prior applications and this application, a resolution to resolve future conditions as a result of the use or utilization of the site as it relates to traffic and parking. Looking at the hours of operation as it relates to the retail sale of goods and services, potential future adjustment to that, such as appointment only. Further discussion and resolution of landscaping and sightline conflicts, and also buffering the as it relates to loading and screening. And then the lighting plan clarification. We use the term neighborhood appropriate and night sky compliant. We'll do a better job at putting those into sentences as we write that letter to the planning board. Rich is smiling, but those are kind of the bullet points that I've taken away from the discussion. Does anybody have any clarification or additions to add to that?
Yep, sounds good.
John? Again, I see those as 6 items. Would anybody like to discuss those any further, or if everybody's satisfied, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we move this along to the planning board, articulating those 6 points of discussion.
Do I hear a second?
Jamie Gorman, I'll second.
I'll do a roll call. Any discussion on the motion? I don't hear any or see any hands. I'll do a roll call. Those in favor, Joe Murphy.
Aye. Aye.
John Schock.
Nay.
Jamie Gorman.
Aye.
Rich.
Aye.
And Jamie Rabbit is an aye.
David Flanders is aye.
And David. All right, so we have, I believe, 5, I count right, 5 in favor and 1 opposed. So motion carries. Again, thank you everyone for and reading the information and providing insight into the discussion and decision.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
For everybody.
Bye-bye.
Just as we move forward, Ryan and Jay, our staff meeting is pushed from 11 o'clock to the conclusion of this meeting. Just give me a moment.
I just sent an email to Lynn to let her know we're still in this.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I was just going to text her. Thank you. So Jay, I think we have Shepherd's Run up next.
Brett.
Yes, sir. Let me, I got way too many screens open right now. Next item is D2, preliminary plan, major land development, Shepherd's Run, proposed destination resort, including boutique hotel, winery and vineyard, restaurant, indoor and outdoor events, spa and fitness center, and extended stay bungalows. Assessors Plat 50-4, Lot 12, located at 4780 Tower Hill Road. Shepherd's Run LLC applicant, Shepherd's Run Land Holdings LLC owner. I believe Mr. Schoen is on the line.
I am on the line. Yep. Yeah. And I don't know if Jay, you can put my screen on. It's up to you, one way or another. But yeah. So sorry for the. Looks like I just rejoining the meeting.
So just for as an agenda item, we are to agenda item D2, preliminary plan, major land development, Shepherd's Run, proposed destination or resort, including boutique hotel, winery and vineyard, restaurant, indoor, outdoor events, spa and fitness center, and extended stay bungalow. AP 50-4, Lot 12, located at 4780 Tower Hill Road, Shepherd's Run LLC. Applicant Shepherd's Run LLC. Shepherd's Run Land Holdings LLC owner. And have the representative of that LLC with us.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, that was a lot of entities, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think from what we sent at concept master plan, our big changes are really no changes from what we sent from concept, but we obviously needed to get a lot of studies and work done with the state agencies. So I believe all of that stuff is in the package now. I think, as everybody kind of knows, phase 1 here, it does not include the cottage work. This is all within the existing building for our construction stuff, along with the decks and patio areas and that sort of thing. But happy to kind of jump in and answer any questions as they come up. And yeah, it's again, apology for the delay. We've been trying to work with the state agencies to get some of this stuff here for a while, but I believe we have it all now. So thank you.
Questions or concerns?
Yeah, Jamie, the Conservation Commission had some concerns when we met on August 4th. We're concerned about runoff from the restaurant, as it may contain oil and grease. And basically all our concerns are based on the steep grade down to Petaquamscut Cove. And wondering if those septic systems are old. I don't know how old they are. Are they really going to be up to handling the restaurant, the hotel, the bungalows? So that was one concern we had. Another concern was about the vineyard, and wondering what we would like to see it be certified organic, just so that again, because of what might run off into the cove with regard to herbicides, pesticides, and that like. So those were our concerns. We also had requested another evaluation once they come to preliminary. I don't know if that can happen or not, but those were our basic concerns: the septic, the runoff, and the organic, the non-organic vineyards.
David, let me just clarify, because one was concerns for, in essence, oil grease separation on the septic, and then runoff, you kind of merge those two?
Yeah, well, it's concerned
Explain
for
runoff. Yep.
Yep. And the third would be possible herbicide, pesticide runoff from the vineyard.
Okay.
I mean, it's a very sensitive area. I think we should really, pay a lot of attention to it. We're going right down to a national refuge. It's quite a pristine site right now, and this is a large scale development. And I just want to make sure we cover all the bases here.
So I can address some of the questions. So we did submit the study through DEM on the septic system. It is designed to handle. There is actually a small grease interceptor, which we would, when the restaurant gets built, we would be increasing the size of that grease interceptor to make sure that all the kitchen grease. But there was a commercial kitchen always here. Just to be clear, there was a cafeteria space, which is becoming the restaurant. So it's not, and to be clear, that was serving 120 full-time residents breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's not the scale and capacity of what we're looking to do is actually a decrease on that restaurant side, and the same thing from the lodging standpoint. Again, 120 full-time residents is what the plan was submitted for. That system was designed in 2005, 2006. I can't remember the exact date. And it gets inspected twice a year. It's recorded with the town. Effluent Technologies is the third-party inspector on that system. And again, we've had engineers look at it. We've had DEM look at it. I know Rich and John Chalk are looking at it as well. But we believe it's sufficient for the site. As far as the vineyard, there's no certified organic vineyards in the Northeast. I don't think I can stand here today and say I can guarantee organic certification. Now, it is 100% our plan to use as minimal as possible. And there's new technology coming out every day. There's sprays like garlic spray that they're actually using in Champagne that is supposed to minimize, pests and things like that. It is something that we are very thoughtful about, but I can't guarantee it.
I was just, well, that was my concern, but I was just know that when you go into a wine store, you do find organic wines. So I'm just wondering, isn't that possible?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the region you're growing in. If you find one from the Northeast, I will definitely talk to them. But there's, as everyone knows, we have a much higher level of humidity here, which there are mitigation measures. We're going to be blowing more air to try to keep circulation through the vines, but funguses do occur around here a lot more than drier climates in other areas. We're going to try to keep the canopy down through lots of cutting and stuff. And I mean, I could go through the details. Our vineyard manager graduated in environmental science from Boulder. He's incredibly concerned about it, and something that's on the top of what he thinks about. And I mean, I think if you look at my track record, my first hotel company was called Hotel Terra for a reason. It was founded in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was an environmental hotel, and my family and I feel very strongly about that. I just can't make that guarantee. But I do understand the concern, and it is something that we definitely look to address, and we're going to be as careful as we possibly can. But, and I not to belittle the point either, because I think you have a really good point. But today we could grow any type of agriculture we want on those fields, and there would be no restriction. We are going to try to be as responsible as we possibly can, but I think it's important that we keep that in perspective. That I can't guarantee it.
David, I have a little bit of knowledge in prior permitting lives with a few wineries, and again, in the Northeast, to the applicant's point, their product or the grapes are very susceptible to those swings in humidity, and basically the blight, fungus, mold. And it's one of those things that the vineyard manager literally has to track on a daily basis and find it quickly and treat it quickly in order to prevent that from decimating an entire crop or a strand of grape. It is expensive to monitor, and it's expensive to treat. So my experience is they are very diligent in the amount and applications that have to be undertaken. And I'll equate it to, a lawn. It's not someone who just keeps putting more nitrogen on because they want a greener lawn. They couldn't afford to do it that way. It's literally, it's spot treatments and recognition quickly by the vineyard manager. So, my experience at least is that it is applied in a very practical manner. And it's not, hey, we think it's humid today, let's go fog the fields. It's done very strategically because it is not an inexpensive endeavor. Similar to a well-managed turf facility or golf course, a lot of times it's about the economics, and it is not inexpensive to maintain those economics. So, but David, your point is well taken.
And just to kind of parody or jump off of that, I think it's I am open to having an IPM program, and I'm happy to record that program with the town if that's helpful. Those of you, I'm not sure who's familiar with it or not, but that's a pest management program, and we could. I know URI actually does some work with that as well, and the sprayer that we get, depending on which sprays we can use, we are 100% doing what's called a recirculating sprayer. So what that does is it actually loops either side of the vine, and then it sprays around in a circle and has vacuums that actually suck everything back in. So really all you're doing is spraying that canopy. So, I do understand the concern, and it is something that we want to address, but I just wanted to be in the cost of these things, as Jamie said, is quite considerable. So,
Got it.
John, Rich?
No, I mean, we've got the sewer feasibility study. We're plowing through that. I'm okay with everything else with the project at this point.
Joe? Thumbs up? Okay. And Rich, you were okay? I think two critical points to mention are, with this application, we were waiting for state review from Rhode Island DOT, as well as DEM and Coastal Resource Management, and those letters have been submitted by the applicant, which check two significant boxes in the review of this application at this phase. So I'll ask Jamie Gorman and then Chris whether there are any other issues that you see that we need to make the planning board apprised of.
Jamie Gorman. Yeah, I'm not seeing any issues. The system suitability reviewed, and then the CRMC PD relative to the phases seems to be pretty well in line with what's laid out here. So I don't see any issues with at this stage.
Chris, at this stage, did you see anything that jumped out at you?
No, Jamie, I don't see anything. We have driven the site for accessibility. He's not changing any accessibility for the project, so I don't see any issues as an accessibility for fire apparatus or emergency services apparatus at this time. So we're good.
I think potentially to address David's comment, and Ryan has stated he has no issues with it, that if we made any recommendation to the planning board out of the technical review committee, is that the applicant provide a management plan for the vineyard as it relates to pesticide and herbicide applications, and how that will occur and be managed. David, do you feel that would be appropriate?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Jamie, I have a couple of quick questions and clarifications.
Sure, Jay.
Ryan, I see on the plan, I see that there's a future pool area. um, in this vicinity. Do you anticipate when that would be undertaken?
I don't. Yeah, it wasn't something that we were planning for any time in the. I'm thinking maybe as part of when we do the bungalows, phase 3, if we get there. But I don't see it as any time in the near term.
Okay, and in regards to phasing, I think we might need to modify how this is being considered at the moment. This is the first phase, and you're at the very least you're proposing the bungalows in a separate phase. So I think when this goes to the planning board, it should be understood and characterized as phase 1. The first phase of the approval for the preliminary plan, so that you'd be coming back in the future for an additional preliminary plan review for the bungalows or whatever phases you have articulated going forward that aren't included in phase 1. And that's not really, I don't, maybe I missed it, but I don't know if it's clearly recognized in that manner. And the other question I have is to Ryan and Jamie Gorman is, has the parking requirements been reviewed? And I don't believe we've seen a parking schematic showing the number of spaces and whether or not the proposed parking on the site satisfies the need, including, patrons and staff and for events and such. Is that something that has been looked at?
So that actually was on my list of questions to ask you guys about today. Our goal for the parking, I'd like to keep it as, I don't want to line a bunch of parking spaces if I don't have to. We will do that if that's required. When the largest time when there are events happening, the goal is to have 100% valet parking. And so I would like to line it out from a square footage standpoint, if that works for you guys. I know within these existing basketball courts, based on the town's calculations, we can fit all the parking into them. But I was hoping that we don't line everything out and then we basically just take pieces and say, hey, there's an event going on. If we absolutely had to, we would park, on this grass or in these areas, that kind of stuff. But when we have 30 odd guest rooms, which is the majority of it, it would be better not to have, huge grid of parking lots set up. So I wanted to kind of ask that. I have the calculation that I put together that says, well, I didn't really put it together, but it's based on the town's, each of the occupancy code type things. And then with the square footage allotment we have. And so I wasn't sure if we needed to do something more or less than that.
Yeah, I would say touch base with Jamie, make sure that that you're approaching the calculations the right manner. Parking is important. Circulation is certainly a component of the review. So not marking the spaces might prove to be difficult. You could show a schematic that shows striped spaces in the event that, well, I don't want to get into what would be acceptable or not, but provided that you have enough parking on the site would be good. And I think you should probably go back and have a plan drawn up that clearly identifies the phases, block them out in polygons, call them phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So going into the review process, the board and staff and everybody knows what is on the table currently and what would be potentially coming in the future. But I would suggest you reach out to Jamie and talk about the parking and anticipate that it would be a discussion item with the planning board. So it may be a difficult conversation to have if you can't show spaces and circulation and turning movements, or if there's going to be a significant component that will be valeted that will minimize some of those concerns because they're in your control and not the patrons. So something to think about.
Yeah, typically the yield on your parking is going to be significantly less if you don't have controls or striping. So, where you have striping, you're going to park the cars every 9 feet. But if you don't have striping, you don't have those controls, you're not going to get that much yield out of the same space.
Okay.
But I think there's something to be said about not necessarily requiring them to be striped, but at least showing the configuration and potentially thinking about an alternative if you would not want to stripe it. You just need to have a manner in which you can convey how the parking layout is going to work and what you're going to do to, on the site to realize that configuration.
In summary, what I have potentially is that the parking allocation needs to be calculated and clarified as it relates to areas, dimensions, including drive aisles. So you equate this to if all of the rooms were occupied and you were also having an event, we understand that the event in essence will be on overflow areas, which could be, but if you're just showing, a 3,000 square foot area, it's easy to have someone stripe that with some, to Joe's point, not 9 by 18 spaces, but perhaps 10 by 20 spaces, because you're going to lose a little bit of that in the unstriped, and make sure those drive aisles function, as well as these physical spaces that you can get in and out of everything. And then you're parked for that event, as well as the success of your vineyard. Because Ryan, the ultimate goal of us is to make sure you're successful and don't have any glitches in that opportunity for success, that you realize you don't have enough parking. So if you have a full hotel, you can't have an event, or if you have an event, you can't have anyone stay at your hotel.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that makes sense.
wine tastings have to shut down. So
yeah, exactly.
it's accommodating. Really, you have 3 uses on the facility. You have a hotel, a vineyard, or for me, a restaurant and an event center. So it's trying to find that nice mix of hard surface parking as well as that overflow.
Jamie, I think one thing we might want to add is if Ryan is proposing that events are all going to be valeted or managed parking in some way, shape, or form, that there be a parking management plan for, however those events are going to be managed, for vehicles that are not going to be parked by their owners on site.
Yeah, I think that would be maybe acceptable probably to the board, where you have a striped parking lot for your everyday parking for the hotel, and then condition of approval where you're using a parking attendant during events. So that may be, that's a possibility.
Okay.
And Ryan, just for further clarification, out of my own curiosity, have you inquired with the neighboring properties about the occasional use of a nearby parking lot for overflow in the case that you need it in lieu of parking on grass or unimproved areas?
Yeah, both have indicated that's not going to be a problem. The state, I have to get an actual, I guess, some kind of licensing agreement for liability purposes, but the DOA over there said they don't anticipate it being a problem, especially if it's evenings and weekends, which would probably be, when we're looking at it. So they said that was fine, and the principal at Prout, Dave Estes, has indicated that's fine with them as well.
That might be good to include in your parking plan, just to make sure everybody is aware that you're going to try to avoid overflow parking on non-parking areas by utilizing those nearby parking lots.
Okay.
And that's the exact kind of thing I was suggesting, by having a management plan so that everybody understands where everything is going to go and that you've accounted for it.
Okay, it's not a problem. You can definitely do that. Jay, to your other question, I felt like in another one of these sheets here, we had the color coded one that says off to the right, phase 1, 2, 3. Am I? Yeah, if we keep clicking through, well, one more. Is that the last one?
That's the last page.
I thought I remembered that in the original revision as well.
Yeah, they had a blue and a green that said phase 1, 2, 3. So,
I think that was at conceptual.
okay. Well, I'll definitely get that sheet over to you then. If we dropped it, I thought I.
Jay, it's
This
actually
isn't
in the, it's on page 03 of the architectural. It's under the building permit. I have it on my screen if you want me to share it.
Sure. Am I sharing? Yeah, I'm still sharing. Sorry.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Zoom in a little.
And so to be clear, we labeled it phase 1 and phase 1B on the building set because phase 1A and 1B are both involved in this. It's just going to be two building permits. But from a planning point of view, 1A and 1B are both anticipated. And then phase 2 and 3 are future.
I think, Ryan, you just need to slide that pool into phase 2 or phase 3.
Yep, that makes, I put a note down for that. You are correct.
Unless you're building it this summer.
Definitely not. Got our hands full.
Ryan, and belt and suspenders, it may be prudent to include this in the site plan sheet, in the site plan set, indicating the phases, and then have the title block modified to call out that the plans that you have are for phase 1, so that it's clear now and it's clear going forward if somebody references the plan set in the future.
Perfect. Will do.
So with the discussion, I see 3 items that have risen to the forefront. Item number 1 is the management plan for the vineyards and grounds as it relates to herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizer applications. Item 2 is a clarification of the phasing plan, which we just touched upon. And item number 3 is solidifying the parking arrangements as it relates to area, dimension, and circulation, and providing that in the form of a parking management plan. Does anyone have any additional comments? And Jay, before is there anyone in the audience at this time?
There are. Anyone in the audience have any questions? Please raise your hand. I see no hands.
Okay. So with those 3 items, if any of the committee members have any additional to add, it'd be appropriate to have that discussion now. If not, I would entertain a motion.
Hey, Jamie, I apologize. Did you say concurrence with the sewer feasibility study?
I do not have that on there, John.
So which we're going to get through. I mean, we just got it. So we'll try to get that done before the planning board meeting. I think we're just on a high level. We're going to sign off on what was proposed, but we need to do it formally in a letter.
Okay, so we would add that as item number 4.
Thank you.
Any other comments or additions we would need to make? Okay, so again, 4 items: management plan for vineyard and grounds as it relates to herbicides, pesticides, fertilizer, clarification of a phasing plan, and then in essence, item number 3, submission of a parking management plan, and 4, concurrence with sewer feasibility.
I'll so move.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? Hearing none, take a roll. Joe Murphy,
Aye.
Jamie Gorman,
Aye.
Rich Bourbonnais,
Aye.
John Shock,
Aye.
David Flanders. who
I'm
we-
going to abstain.
Dave,
I'm going to abstain.
okay. And Jamie Rabbit is an aye. So we have 4 in favor with 1 abstention. Motion carries.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And we'll get right on these items.
Thank you.
Good luck, Ryan.
Luck, Ryan.
Thank you.
So that gets us to agenda item E. And I would entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
I'm assuming everyone's in favor of that.
Aye.
All those in favor?
My phone is running out of power, so.
Okay. All right, all. Thank you, everyone, for, again, your diligence in looking at these and providing input.
Thank you, Jamie. Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Jay.
Jamie.
Yep.
Have a good day.
See you, everybody.